Kia ora koutou katoa. Over the last 3 weeks I've preached on prayer, Bible study and fasting, all considered traditional spiritual disciplines in the season of Lent. Today, the last in the series, I want to share some thoughts about almsgiving. Using the metaphor of the heart to talk about the spiritual life. Prayer can be thought of as slowing the heart, like meditation does. Bible study can be thought of as listening with the heart, listening for the word that brings life. And fasting can be thought of as supporting the heart through prudence. In this metaphor of heart, almsgiving would be the beat of the heart, the rhythm. So ideally we don't give alms because there is a need, or because we feel sorry for or compassionate towards another, or because we have money or resources surplus to our requirements. Important though, responding to a need, being compassionate and sharing resources are. Rather, we give alms because that's what a spiritual heart does. Just like our physical heart beats. It's a sign we are alive. The spiritual heart, that is our individual Christian life and our life as Christians in community, give alms not to gain a reward, not because we are told to, not even to address the great needs of the world. Giving alms is just what we do, like breathing, like our heart beating. Our second reading this Sunday is from Matthew 25, and it's a complicated text because the ideas in the original early Jesus movement thread are very different from the revised edition that Matthew gives to us. The original is about the beating heart of the Christian life, namely feeding and giving drink, welcoming and clothing, visiting the sick and imprisoned. These are called in shorthand the works of love and mercy, and they are the rhythm of the Christian life. They are performed without anything else in view, done without an expectation of reward or fear of punishment. Well, love is not love if it's in it for gain. If love has a reason, if it makes good sense, you can be sure that something's going on other than love. For love needs no reason. It just beats like a heart. As the great mystic Meister Eckhart would say, works of love and mercy are performed without why. And love without why, as the philosopher John Caputo would say, is a weak God mode. But Matthew, the final editor of our reading today, doesn't believe in the weak God mode, the love without why, love without gain or reason. He believes in the strong God mode, who orders people to obey and punishes them when they don't. He takes the phrase in the book of Daniel, the Son of Man, which originally meant someone of flesh and bone, one of the nobodies of the world, and he makes this Son of Man into a high and mighty judge over the nations. And for the judgment criteria, Matthew uses the works of love and mercy, feeding and giving drink, welcoming and clothing, visiting the sick and imprisoned. See, Matthew turns these acts of love and mercy into a kind of profit and loss economy. Eternal rewards to be gained for those who helped. Eternal damnation to be gained for those who didn't. And I think on reading Matthew's account, Jesus would have wept. Another way of expressing what I'm saying, love is not so much what we do, but something we are. Giving is not so much something we do, but something we are. Loving giving is not what the heart does, but what the heart of faith is. As I said, it's like breathing. Not something we have to think about, reason about, or be motivated to do. It's just something that happens because we are alive, spiritually alive. Almsgiving exercises the heart, to use that phrase, in both senses of that phrase. When we give more and sacrificially give, the spiritual heart is nourished. Giving is good for the giver, whether the giver is part of a spiritual tradition or not. Giving, especially the type of giving that makes room for the other, makes a place next to our place at the table, a table we call planet Earth. This builds peace and well-being among all people. Giving is a good in itself, regardless of the benefit to the receiver. Though, as I've said, this is not the motivation to give. There is no motivation to give. It's just who we are. Almsgiving also exercises the heart in the sense that, especially in these days of instant international and national news, there is so much need, so much catastrophe, so much dire poverty, so many in our own country even who need assistance. And we don't know how best to help, or which helping organizations are the best to support. We want to give to everyone, but we can't. We want to address the causes of poverty and distress, but the causes seem many and mammoth. They often are. So what do we do? But this is not the only challenge when it comes to almsgiving. Christianity was born out of the countercultural, egalitarian Jesus movement, where there was one pater familias, God, head of the household, and everyone else was brothers and sisters to each other. And further, this vision extended beyond the household of faith to include the oikumene, the whole inhabited earth. This was a vision of a classless, non-hierarchical world that did not privilege gender, race, or wealth. So the question arises, how do we give to those in need without creating or endorsing a split between those who have and those who have not? How do we give trusting and honoring the receiver? How do we receive trusting and honoring the giver? How can giving and receiving build mutuality and respect rather than entrench class and wealth divisions? And such questions have long been with us. I was reading a bit of the historian Richard Flynn's book the other day about Christianity in the later Roman Empire. And he points out how our forebears tried to encourage reciprocity by reframing the poor as fellow Christians rather than as people of a lower social class. I think in Corinthians you can see Paul doing the same. Another way to frame this dilemma about giving is to explore the difference between a charity model and a justice model. A charity model is where the giver is always the giver, handing over funds to help and expecting accountability on how those funds are used. In the charity model, the receiver gets help, and maybe enough help to build or re-establish some self-sufficiency or communal sufficiency, but remains fiscally vulnerable to future political or climatic events. So an example might be an aid agency, say with monies from New Zealand donors supporting an impoverished overseas community by assisting them to build or dig a new well. However, sometime later, due, let's say, to a civil war, that impoverished community flee and become refugees. I give this example not to criticize the charity model, for charity is needed. And it is how significant funds, in addition to government funds, can get to some of those on our planet who are in the direst need. The best aid agencies build long-term relationships with communities, like in this example I gave, and stay with them when catastrophes happen. It's not dissimilar to ADC microfinance in that regard. And again, like ADC microfinance, which St. Luke's, as you know, helped to initiate and set up, the charity model is an empowerment model. Whether you're giving to provide immediate relief, or to dig a well, or to provide small loans to small local businesses, it's all about empowering individuals and communities. The justice model is different again, though it too is about empowerment. You may remember a few weeks back I wrote about the documentary No Māori Allowed by Reikura Kahi, which recalls the racist history of Pukokoi, which is about an hour south from our parish, and the work of redress going on. The most significant catalyst for what transpired in Pukokoi, and they had some real racist practices right up into the early 1970s. The catalyst was the land wars of the 1860s, and local Māori being forced from their land. The land was then given to Pākehā farmers, who have now been on the land for several generations. Māori did return to Pukokoi and got work on the land they used to own. Over the decades since, the effect of having no land and no capital, low wages and racial discrimination has consigned and confined most Māori in Pukokoi to some level of poverty. Redressing such poverty and the injustice behind it is not a simple matter. Looking truthfully at history is not a simple matter. The return of land is not a simple matter. The return and building up of mana, these are not simple matters. It takes more than money and goodwill, though both money and goodwill can be a doorway to change. And Kahi's documentary, the reason it's so good is it indicates this. It does not provide simple solutions. However, though not simple, justice almsgiving is critical to expediting that vision of peace and well-being that the Jesus community has. As an aside, I once spent 6 months as the minister in the neighbouring parish of Tūkau. And in talking with local Māori, they would make mention of the war. I quickly came to realise they were talking about the 1860s. Like in my own family, where the war that produced the most trauma was given the honorific "the." So it was with these locals in Turkau. The justice model of almsgiving also requires long-term relationships, a long-term commitment, and the will to create a future where all people can not only survive but thrive. But it will require deep listening, the imagination to walk in another's shoes, the patience that trauma healing needs, and the willingness to consider giving up what we might think is vitally important to our identity and well-being in order to learn that it isn't. I finish with a quote from Lila Watson. She's an Indigenous Australian artist, activist, academic. And she writes, talking about this justice model of almsgiving, "If you have come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you recognize that your liberation and mine are bound up together, we can walk together." Blessings to you this week.